it.
Oh,
now
gosh.
I can do it. Now I can do another layer. And then I'm like, well, if I can see through it, I bet I could see the work from the backside even more if there was light behind there. And so, there's this whole thing going on.
And how does it destabilize the image when the lightest, even the lightest pigment is stopping the light from coming through it? And so then how does that change and shift the nature of the value system that you've created, the nature of the color relationships that you've created?
Right.
So I'm really interested in that destabilization and anything that you can introduce. My problem is, so I love experimenting. My problem is, how do I manage not introducing so many variables at the same time that it becomes confounding? And so it's a real, it's a equilibrium. Like I was saying, trying to find the middle path for me as an extremely nervous and easily excitable person, to kind of find that equanimity in the work where, it makes sense. And I'm not sure I do that. My works are really maximal, really energetic, and sometimes maybe even aggressive. And so kind of finding out how does it work? What's the interesting thing? I'm trying. I'm listening. I listen to. I don't know if you listen to Museum Confidential.
No, I haven't.
I'm enthusiastic.
I need to write that down.
Museum Confidential. It's out of Tulsa.
Really?
So, it really jives with the whole, concept that you're creating here. But except it's less in the studio with artists and more with probably curators and people who are presenting art, or maybe,
So it's sort of like the modern art note. Oh, wait, see.
Modern Art Notes podcast.
I just call it Man. The Man podcast, right?
Yeah, it's a great podcast. Hard to say. Right. Kind of like that. I think it may be more a general audience because it's less MFA type language, meta language that you learn.
Is highly academic, in terms of
and I
where
love
he
him
wants
for
to
that
go.
reason.
Right.
I love him for that reason. But you do need some education to understand what he's saying, or the nuance of what he's saying. And this one, I don't necessarily think that you do. Jonathan Keats was on it, and he's known as the experimental philosopher, and he was talking about the idea of embracing the notion of being a dilettante, because dilettante has gotten a real pejorative tinge to it. So he's an experimental philosopher, largely self-taught. He writes for Wired magazine and does a lot with technology, not on Facebook, doesn't have a cell phone, doesn't have a car.
Right.
But making him able to actually look at technology and observe its effects without becoming absorbing, like you were talking about with the pigment, of becoming so excited about what's possible that you can't see straight anymore.
Right.
And I had a moment with that, and this is all coming to sort of my point is that I'm trying to study for myself a survey in philosophy, because I think there's a point in my work now where I feel like it's necessary. And I've gotten a little bit of it through art history, but not a proper, actual learning of philosophy. But anyway, back to Keats, is what he was saying is that, if we were living in the Renaissance, it would be expected that we would have a wide and varied, healthy interest in a lot of things. But now that's seen as wasteful, unproductive, and anything, and our high capitalism has made anything that is divergent thinking, discursive, suspect. I mean, we celebrate it. So people celebrate the arts, but then they also kind of want to know what your day job is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's always kind of coming around to but really, what do you do? And so when you really say, no, really, I'm an artist, and and sort of bring them around to what that looks like and the varied ways that people exist as artists in this culture. And kind of a hostile climate in some ways, and this whole hidden network of support resources like podcasts and residencies and small grants here and there, like the Nasher grants coming up, and these great ways that people sustain their practice. And most of us teach, and how that is actually part. It's not like something that you do and then the end of the day you start your practice. It's part of living that out.
Absolutely.
So, But the whole idea of being able to explore things and not think of it as of like, well, I'm going to listen to this podcast and at the end of it, it's going to yield X, Y, and Z. Right. It's like being able to accept the inevitability that whatever and everything that you try, that you do, each skill that you learn, each book that you read is going to naturally find its way. You don't have to force its production.
Sure. So my wife and I have been going through this Strengths Finder, right? And one of the strengths is connectedness, and that's someone's obsession with and propensity to see how everything is connected, right? And so, I feel like having varied interest, having a diverse background is only adding to your ability to connect dots in unique ways that, people haven't connected dots before.
And also to understand experience, I love, there's an artist talk that Laura Owens did at the Hammer Museum, and it's on Vimeo, and she talks about like having to put things to the side sometimes and go out of the studio and live life and get some experiences that you can make work about. Because even high formalism, it's like sometimes, I get a little cynical of like, I don't want to look at just any more striped bands of colors. Right. And I think that, and then I go into the gallery and then I'm fascinated by the particular color selections and the color theory that go into it, and I'm excited again. But there is this ebb and flow of like, sustaining it and generating enough interest that there is a connectedness to the human experience in that high formalism and the abstract concepts. And even back to what I was talking about with teaching myself philosophy is like, Aristotle expressing basic ideas in mathematical formulas, so you don't get fixated on this person's name versus that person's name. It's just if A is B and C is A, then C is B. The most elegant way to express something are in these abstractions of like the Pythagorean theorem, A squared plus B squared equals C squared, is a conceptual expression that captures every right triangle. I believe it's right triangle. Forgive me if it's wrong. Every right triangle that ever existed, right? And so that is amazing. Right. So there is this, I hate to bring in like, anything to do with abstract expressionism, but there is this universality that comes out of abstraction, that it can be really interesting. It can seem so disconnected at times as to be unrelatable. Sure. So it's kind of, again, finding that touch point of the varied experience that you can find something that's a through line.
You sound like the type of person that would love to, listen to talks and watch videos. And there's a video by it's BBC produced by Matthew Collings called "The Rules of Abstraction."
Yes,
right.
I've played that in the studio like over and over. Sometimes it's funny that you bring that up.
And so I was watching it last week, and I was just like, when I got to the end, I was like, I feel like I want to do it again, because it was like, these are principles I want to like kind of seep into my practice, right?
Yeah, and sometimes they seem so simple that they don't quite land the implications of it. So listen, like if it bears repeating, maybe I should have gotten it the first time, but I didn't. So, you have to go back through it. And there are several things like that. And one of the things, you actually kind of look like Matthew Collings a little bit if you had a big beard.
Yes. It struck me before, like if I had a huge hipster beard, I would look a lot like Matthew Collings. And I was like, this is odd. But there's another video I haven't finished watching yet, but when he was in a few years ago, he was in town. He and his collaborative partner had a show at the TCU galleries, and while he was here, he came and had a talk at the Nasher. And there's like a video online, that's basically like an hour and a half of him kind of talking about these same concepts.
Thanks, yeah.
as part of a talk at the Nasher. And so I'm meaning to set aside an hour and a half to,
I will do that. I will definitely do that. And like I said, like I do love to let things play in the background, and they tend to be critical or theoretical or historical. And, those things interest me. And, I've had run-ins with, kind of like, it does evoke for me this metaphysical feeling. Those things help me sort of disengage from the everyday and feel more connected to a higher plane, which is what I feel like getting into your studio practice or even a great museum can bring you into that metaphysical place that has sort of supplanted the functions that, religion and its traditional forms have, created for us. So it's really productive for me in that.
Sure.
And that it also helps quell some of my like socio-political anger towards those religious structures, and what I think is it fuels a bit of devaluing creative practice and artists and iconoclastic attitudes, anti-intellectual attitudes that pervade places that are not New York. And so I think it's particularly relevant to this conversation that we're having, that it's relevant. Right. And those cultural institutions like the Nasher, the DMA, the Modern, as much, as it's been a little bit bemoaned about the influence of starchitects. The reason they're there are those are our cultural cathedrals now. Like those are the places that the good ideas, the ideas that are just moving ahead regardless of whatever else is lagging behind, they're doing. And I think everything's so ideologically bogged down now with a label. It's like, do you think everyone should have healthcare? Well, that's a liberal idea, so no. Whether they actually think that or not,
right?
Yeah.
We
don't want to make you die. It seems like a trap.
No. It's just one of those things where, like, I think our society is, precluded to wanting to make everything a binary topic, right? And the world is not binary. It's all, every topic is somewhere on a spectrum that. And so it, but I think there's got to be a way that folks can be more open to productive dialogues. And I'm not, I'm not sure how. I wish that art could be part of that without being overtly political.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a point where political art is, it can be, discounted. It can be kind of, it cannot be as...
They can mount their defenses against it, right? It's like, I was posting about Felix Gonzalez Torres' Death by Gun piece from the early 90s, or maybe it was mid-90s. And I think it's 1995. Sorry, date, you know the time frame.
Folks can always fact check you.
Yeah, look it up, guys. But it's a piece worth noting that he was thinking about gun culture and violence and artists have, and I think regardless, at that time there were no parkland activists and those kinds of things, but he was thinking about it, and it is overtly political, and so for people who are not interested in that, it's more easily dismissible. But I think the artist's job is just to keep making the art, and I do, for me, and this may be controversial, I don't mean to piss everyone off, but identity politics to me, it's been going on for a really long time in the art world, is like exploring identity. I think that investigation of the matrix of oppression is really important, but if you think about the logical ends of identity politics, it means that your outward expression of your skin color, your outward expression of gender, sexual orientation, these things